There's a quiet strength you can feel before you ever see it. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't beg for attention. It just stands there, steady, like it knows something the rest of the room hasn't figured out yet. High-value women move like that. They don't chase. They don't force outcomes. They don't run after people who are running away from themselves. And somehow, almost unfairly, they always seem to win in the end. Not because they're lucky, not because life is easy for them, but because they understand something most people learn too late. They know their worth without needing proof. That sentence sounds simple, almost quiet, but it carries a kind of weight that can stop a room if you really let it land. Because most people spend their entire lives chasing proof. Proof that they matter. Proof that they're chosen. Proof that they're enough. Proof in the form of messages, attention, praise, likes, commitment, promises. And the exhausting part is this: no amount of proof ever seems to be enough for someone who doesn't already believe. High-value women didn't wake up one day magically confident. They weren't born untouched by doubt or fear. They felt rejection. They questioned themselves. They stood in front of mirrors on hard days and wondered why they weren't seen the way they wanted to be seen. The difference is that somewhere along the way, something shifted. They stopped asking the world to confirm their value and started confirming it for themselves. They learned that worth is not a debate. It's not something you argue into existence. It's something you decide. There's a moment most people remember, even if they don't talk about it. A moment when they gave more than they should have. When they explained themselves too much. When they stayed silent about disrespect because they were afraid of losing someone. That moment teaches you something if you let it. It teaches you how fragile external validation really is, how fast it disappears, how expensive it becomes when you pay for it with your dignity. High-value women remember those moments. They don't deny them. They don't romanticize them either. They use them. They learn that begging for proof of love never creates love. It only creates imbalance, and imbalance slowly turns into resentment. So they stop asking questions like, "Am I good enough for you?" and start asking, "Are you good enough for the life I'm building?" That shift changes everything. You can see it in the way they move through rooms. They don't scan faces for approval. They don't perform. They listen. They observe. They speak when they have something real to say. Silence doesn't scare them because silence doesn't threaten their identity. They know who they are even when no one is clapping. Psychology calls this internal validation, and research consistently shows that people who develop it experience lower anxiety, stronger boundaries, and healthier relationships. But you don't need studies to recognize it. You've felt it when you've been around someone like that. Their calm steadies you. Their presence doesn't demand energy, it offers it. They don't rush to explain themselves when misunderstood, not because they don't care, but because they understand something deeply human. People who want to understand you will listen, and people who don't will twist anything you say anyway. So they save their breath, they save their heart. They don't shrink just to be digestible. Think about how rare that is. Most people will overextend themselves just to keep a connection alive. High-value women don't confuse attachment with connection. If something feels one-sided, they notice it early, not with panic, with clarity. And clarity is powerful because it removes drama, it removes fantasy, it brings things back to truth. When someone pulls away, they don't chase after answers. They don't send the extra message. They don't ask, "Did I do something wrong?" Because they understand that distance is already an answer. And instead of internalizing that distance as a reflection of their worth, they treat it as information, neutral, honest, useful. That's emotional maturity. They know their worth without needing proof because they've built a relationship with themselves that doesn't collapse under uncertainty. They trust their own perception. They trust their own standards. They trust that being alone is not a failure, it's a foundation. There's a quiet courage in that. The courage to sit with yourself, The courage to not fill silence with noise or loneliness with the wrong person. The courage to wait without bitterness. High-value women understand that love offered under pressure is not love, it's negotiation. And they don't negotiate their value. Look at real life. The woman who doesn't double text when a reply doesn't come. The woman who doesn't chase closure from someone who couldn't show up consistently. The woman who hears, "I'm not ready," and believes it the first time, not as a challenge, not as an invitation, as truth. She doesn't try to prove she's worth being ready for. That's where the power is. Because the moment you stop trying to prove your worth, you stop giving other people control over how you feel about yourself. You stop handing out emotional weapons. You stop tying your self-esteem to someone else's mood, availability, or attention span. And here's the part no one tells you up front. When you stop needing proof, people start offering it freely. Not because you asked, because confidence that doesn't beg is magnetic. But even if they don't, she's still steady. She doesn't need constant reassurance to stay grounded. She doesn't need to be chosen to feel chosen. She chooses herself daily in small, consistent ways. Through boundaries, through rest, through honesty, through walking away when something costs her more than it gives. That doesn't make her cold. It makes her safe. Safe for herself, safe for the right people, safe for real love. High-value women don't attach their identity to how someone treats them on a bad day. They don't spiral when plans change or energy shifts. They respond, not react. And that ability to pause instead of panic comes from knowing that their value isn't fragile. It doesn't disappear when someone hesitates. They've learned that real worth doesn't fluctuate. Perception does. Circumstances do. Feelings do. But worth stays. That understanding takes time. It takes falling and getting back up without applause. It takes walking away from situations where you were almost chosen, but never fully respected. It takes rebuilding yourself quietly when no one is watching. And once you've done that, something inside you locks into place. You stop proving, you stop explaining, you stop chasing. Not because you're above anyone, but because you're aligned with yourself. And when you live like that, life meets you differently. People meet you differently. Love meets you differently. Because the strongest statement a person can make isn't loud. It's standing still, rooted, unshaken, and knowing without needing proof that you are already enough. They don't chase because chasing destroys attraction. That truth doesn't come from theory. It comes from experience. From moments when effort became excessive, when care turned into pursuit, and pursuit quietly turned into self-betrayal. Most people don't realize they're chasing until they feel tired, confused, and a little smaller than they used to be. High-value women recognize that feeling early. They don't ignore it. They listen to it. Chasing is rarely about love. It's usually about fear. Fear of losing someone, fear of being alone, fear that if you stop trying, everything will disappear. And fear has a way of convincing us that urgency equals importance, that if we push harder, love will finally stay. But the opposite tends to happen. The harder you chase, the faster attraction dissolves. Attraction needs space to breathe. It grows in curiosity and choice, in the feeling that someone is there because they want to be, not because they're being pulled. When chasing enters the picture, that choice disappears. Effort turns into pressure. Interest turns into obligation, and obligation has never been attractive. High-value women understand this instinctively, even if they learned it the hard way. They've seen what happens when they overextend, when they reply too fast, explain too much, forgive too easily. They've felt that subtle shift where the other person starts leaning back while they lean forward, and instead of leaning further, they stop. Not to play games, not to punish, but to restore balance. Balance is everything. Relationships aren't built on who wants it more. They're built on mutual willingness. The moment one person is chasing, the dynamic tilts. One becomes the prize. The other becomes the pursuer, and the pursuer always loses leverage, dignity, and eventually attraction. Psychology backs this up. Studies on interpersonal attraction show that people are more drawn to partners who demonstrate autonomy and self-sufficiency. When someone appears overly invested too early, it triggers subconscious resistance, not because they're bad people, but because humans are wired to value what feels earned, not handed over. High-value women don't try to hack attraction. They respect it. They understand that desire grows when two people move toward each other at a natural pace, when interest is reciprocated, not chased. So when they sense hesitation, inconsistency, or emotional unavailability, they don't sprint to close the gap. They slow down, they step back, they let reality reveal itself. This is where most people panic. Silence feels dangerous when your self-worth is tied to response. Distance feels like rejection when you believe love must be secured immediately. But high-value women don't confuse discomfort with danger. They know that sitting with uncertainty is better than forcing certainty that isn't real. They allow space, and space does something powerful. It gives the other person room to feel their own emotions, to miss, to reflect, to decide, and if that decision is in alignment, she accepts it without collapsing. That's strength. Real life shows this clearly. The woman who doesn't chase after someone who says they're confused. She doesn't try to convince them. She doesn't offer ultimatums. She simply continues living her life. And often that's when the confusion clears. Not because she waited, but because she stopped chasing. And sometimes it doesn't come back. But here's the truth most people avoid. If someone disappears when you stop chasing, they were never walking toward you in the first place. You were dragging them. High-value women would rather face that truth than live in a dynamic where love has to be pursued like a debt. They don't chase because chasing erodes self-respect. Every unanswered message, every one-sided effort, every ignored boundary chips away at your sense of self. Over time, you start negotiating your needs. You start justifying behavior you would never accept if you weren't afraid. High-value women refuse to make fear their advisor. They understand that attraction is not something you manufacture. It's something that either exists or doesn't. You can nurture it, but you can't force it. And the moment you try, you lose the very thing you're trying to protect. There's also a deeper layer to this. When you chase, you teach people how to treat you. You teach them that inconsistency is acceptable. That minimal effort will be met with maximum availability. High-value women are very aware of this. They know that boundaries are not walls, they're instructions. So when effort isn't matched, they pull their energy back, not emotionally shutting down, but emotionally honest. They don't pretend not to care. They simply refuse to chase someone who isn't choosing them. That restraint takes discipline. It goes against instinct. Everything in you wants to fix, clarify, save. But high-value women have learned that you can't rescue a connection that requires you to abandon yourself. They also understand that attraction includes mystery, not manipulation, but depth. When someone knows they can have unlimited access to you without effort, curiosity fades. When your time, attention, and presence are earned, they carry weight. This doesn't mean being distant or cold. It means being grounded, available but not desperate, open but not overexposed, interested but not attached to outcome. Think about the moments you felt most drawn to someone. It probably wasn't when they were chasing you. It was when they had their own life, their own rhythm, their own center. High-value women become that energy because they choose themselves first. And here's the irony. When you stop chasing, people often start paying attention, not because you changed strategy, but because you changed posture. You stopped leaning forward. You stood upright. Some will step forward to meet you. Some won't. Either way, you win. Because the goal was never to be chosen at any cost. The goal was to be chosen without losing yourself. High-value women don't chase because they trust that what's meant for them won't require pursuit. It will require presence. It will require honesty. It will require mutual effort. And if something fades when they stop running after it, they let it go. Not with bitterness, not with regret, but with the quiet certainty that attraction built on chasing was never meant to last, and self-respect always is. They choose peace over chaos. That choice doesn't look dramatic from the outside. There's no big announcement, no final speech, no slammed doors or raised voices. Most of the time, it happens quietly, in a moment when no one else is watching, a moment when something familiar starts to feel heavy instead of exciting, when connection starts to feel like tension, when love begins to feel like work that never ends. High-value women notice that moment. They notice when their nervous system is always on edge, when they're rereading messages, replaying conversations, trying to decode moods. They notice when their peace becomes collateral damage in a relationship that keeps asking for more while giving less. And instead of calling that passion or depth or just how relationships are, they call it what it is. Chaos. Chaos wears disguises. Sometimes it shows up as inconsistency, sometimes as hot and cold affection, sometimes as intensity that burns bright but never warms. It can feel addictive at first. The highs are high, the lows are confusing, and confusion has a way of keeping people stuck. High-value women have been there. They've mistaken anxiety for chemistry. They've believed that longing meant love. They've stayed up late trying to fix something that was never broken, just misaligned. And eventually, they learned the cost. Peace became more valuable than potential. Peace became more attractive than promises. Peace became non-negotiable. They don't choose peace because they're weak. They choose it because they're strong enough to walk away from emotional noise. They understand that love is not supposed to feel like a constant test. That connection should calm you, not keep you in survival mode. Neuroscience supports this. Healthy relationships regulate the nervous system. Unhealthy ones keep it activated. When you're constantly in fight or flight, your body is telling you something your heart might be trying to ignore. High-value women listen to that signal. They stop romanticizing chaos. They stop calling emotional unpredictability excitement. They stop believing that love has to hurt to be real. They stop thinking that if they just try harder, understand more, or give more, everything will settle down. Instead, they settle themselves. They choose environments, people, and rhythms that allow them to breathe. You can see it in how they respond to conflict. They don't escalate. They don't scream to be heard. They don't chase clarity from someone who thrives in confusion. If a conversation turns circular, disrespectful, or draining, they disengage. Not to avoid accountability, but to protect their sanity. They know that chaos feeds on reaction. Peace survives on boundaries. In real life, this looks like the woman who leaves a relationship not because she stopped loving, but because she stopped sleeping. The woman who realizes that being needed all the time doesn't feel like being loved. The woman who walks away from someone who only shows up when things are dramatic. That kind of leaving is not impulsive. It's deliberate. It's the result of many quiet moments of self-reflection. High-value women don't need chaos to feel alive. They've learned that peace doesn't mean boredom. It means safety. It means consistency. It means emotional availability without emotional volatility. And here's something important: peace doesn't mean the absence of problems. It means the presence of respect. It means disagreements that don't turn into emotional warfare. It means honesty without cruelty. It means effort without exhaustion. They choose peace because chaos steals focus. It drains energy that could be used to build a life. And high-value women are builders. They're building careers, families, identities, futures. They don't have time to be constantly recovering from emotional whiplash. They also understand something subtle but powerful: chaos can become familiar, and familiar can feel safe even when it's not. So choosing peace sometimes feels uncomfortable at first. Quiet can feel empty when you're used to noise. Stability can feel strange when you're used to intensity, but they stay. They sit in the quiet long enough to realize it's not empty, it's spacious. In that space, they hear themselves again. Their intuition gets louder. Their needs become clearer. They stop shrinking to keep the peace because they are the peace. They don't argue with red flags. They don't negotiate with patterns. If someone repeatedly brings confusion, disrespect, or instability into their life, They don't try to manage it. They remove themselves from it. Not with hatred, not with revenge, with acceptance. That acceptance is powerful because it doesn't seek closure from chaos. It creates closure through action. High-value women also know that peace is contagious. When they choose it, they attract people who value it too. Their relationships become slower, deeper, and more intentional. Less reactive, more real. They don't chase emotional highs anymore. They choose emotional safety, and the world often misunderstands this. People call them cold, distant, too guarded. But the truth is, they're warm with the right people, open in the right spaces, soft where softness is safe. They've just learned discernment. Choosing peace over chaos means trusting that you don't need to suffer to earn love. It means believing that calm is not the enemy of passion, it's the foundation of it. It means understanding that the right connection won't demand you abandon yourself. High-value women don't wait for chaos to turn into peace. They don't stay hoping someone will change. They choose peace first and let life rearrange itself around that decision. And once you make that choice, something shifts. You stop explaining yourself to people who misunderstand your boundaries. You stop staying where you feel unsettled. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy. You start waking up with clarity instead of dread. You start feeling lighter even when you're alone. You start recognizing that peace isn't boring, it's powerful. They choose peace over chaos not because it's easy, but because it's honest. And in that honesty, they find a life that finally feels like home. They invest where effort is mutual. That decision doesn't come from being cautious, it comes from being awake. Awake to patterns, to energy, to the quiet truth that relationships are not built on words but on movement, on consistency, on who shows up when no one is watching and nothing is being demanded. High-value women have learned this lesson slowly through experience, through giving too much too early, through pouring into people who enjoyed receiving but never learned how to give back, through believing potential was the same thing as effort. And eventually, through realizing that love without reciprocity is just exhaustion dressed up as hope. Mutual effort feels different in the body. It feels calm, balanced, grounded. There's no guessing game, no scoreboard, no silent negotiations. Both people lean in naturally, both initiate, both care enough to act, not just promise. That's what high-value women pay attention to: action. They don't get lost in what someone says they want to do someday. They look at what someone does today. They notice patterns, who follows through, who makes time without being reminded, who listens without needing to be convinced. This isn't cynicism, it's clarity. They understand that effort is one of the most honest languages we have. You can say anything, you can explain anything, but effort tells the truth every time. So, when effort isn't mutual, they don't try to compensate. They don't work harder to balance the scale. They don't give more to inspire someone else to step up, because they've learned that over-giving doesn't create equality, it creates dependency. And dependency is not love. Real life makes this obvious. The woman who stops planning every date. The woman who notices she's always the one reaching out. The woman who pauses and asks herself why she's carrying the emotional labor of two people. That pause is powerful. It's the moment awareness replaces habit. High-value women don't ignore that moment. They step back and observe. And if effort doesn't rise to meet them, they don't get angry, they get honest. Honest with themselves first. Honest about what they need. Honest about what's missing. Psychology calls this emotional reciprocity, and studies consistently show that relationships with balanced effort have higher satisfaction, trust, and longevity. But again, you don't need data to feel it. You feel it when you're not tired of trying, when connection energizes instead of drains. High-value women protect that energy. They don't punish people for not meeting their standards. They simply stop investing. That's the difference. No drama, no speeches, no ultimatums. Just a quiet redirection of time, care, and attention. Because they understand something fundamental: effort is not something you teach an adult. It's something you choose. They don't confuse being patient with being overlooked. They don't confuse understanding with self-abandonment. They don't confuse love with sacrifice that's never returned. When effort is mutual, everything flows. Conversations deepen, trust grows, problems feel solvable. When it's not, everything feels heavy. Even small things feel like work. High-value women trust that feeling. They invest where they feel met, where curiosity is returned, where affection doesn't need to be earned through struggle, where presence is consistent, not conditional. This doesn't mean perfection, it means participation. Mutual effort doesn't require grand gestures. It shows up in small, steady ways, remembering details, checking in, making space, following through, choosing each other even on ordinary days. High-value women notice the ordinary days. They know that consistency over time is far more meaningful than intensity in moments. And when someone consistently falls short, they don't rewrite the story to make it easier to stay. They don't cling to potential. They accept reality as it is. That acceptance is freeing. It allows them to step away without resentment, without needing closure from someone who never fully showed up. Because closure comes from alignment, not explanation. They invest where effort is mutual because they value themselves enough not to beg for basic care. They know that being chosen halfway is not being chosen at all. And here's the quiet irony: when you stop investing in one-sided connections, you create space for balanced ones. Space for people who don't need convincing. People who show up willingly. High-value women don't waste time trying to be unforgettable to someone who treats them as optional. They save their depth for those who need it. They understand that love grows where effort is shared, not chased. That respect forms when both people carry the weight. That connection thrives when no one is keeping score. And when they finally find that kind of reciprocity, they recognize it immediately. It feels easy, not because it lacks depth, but because it has honesty. So they invest there, fully, openly, without fear. Because mutual effort isn't a gamble, it's the foundation. And they don't build on anything less. They understand that winning is not possession, it's alignment. That idea goes against almost everything we're taught to want. We grow up believing that winning means holding on, securing the outcome, making sure nothing slips through our fingers. We're taught to measure success by what stays, by who chooses us, by what we manage to keep. But high-value women learn a different lesson, usually through pain, through endings that didn't make sense at the time, but later felt like protection. They realize that possession without alignment is just fear in disguise. You can have someone beside you and still feel alone. You can be chosen and still feel unseen. You can be committed to and still feel like you're constantly explaining your worth. High-value women recognize that those situations aren't victories, they're compromises, and they cost more than they give. Alignment feels different. It doesn't need force. It doesn't need convincing. It doesn't require shrinking or overextending. When two people are aligned, values meet naturally, direction makes sense. Effort flows without negotiation. You're not trying to pull someone into your life, they're walking with you. That's winning. High-value women stop chasing the illusion of making it work at all costs. They understand that if something requires constant fixing, constant saving, constant justification, then it's not aligned, it's resisting. And resistance always demands sacrifice. Usually your peace, usually your authenticity. They've felt that resistance before. They've stayed in relationships where they were technically chosen but emotionally unsupported, where commitment existed on paper but not in presence, where the title stayed but the connection faded, and one day they realized something important: staying wasn't the same as succeeding. Walking away wasn't losing. It was recalibration. They understand that alignment isn't about perfection. It's about shared direction, about values that don't collide, about goals that don't compete, about respect that doesn't need to be requested. Psychology supports this too. Research on long-term relationship satisfaction shows that shared values and emotional alignment predict happiness far more than chemistry or attachment alone. Chemistry can start something. Alignment sustains it. High-value women pay attention to what sustains. They don't cling to relationships that look good but feel wrong. They don't stay for appearances, timelines, or fear of starting over. They trust that something ending doesn't mean they failed. It means the alignment ended. That trust takes strength, because letting go of possession requires letting go of ego. It requires releasing the need to prove that you were chosen, that you mattered, that you were enough. High-value women don't need a relationship to validate their worth. They need alignment to honor it. So when something isn't aligned, they don't try to control it. They don't try to reshape someone into their vision. They don't hold tighter hoping pressure will turn into commitment. They loosen their grip, not because they don't care, but because they care about truth more than attachment. In real life, this looks like the woman who leaves a relationship that still has love but no future. The woman who says no to a connection that feels intense but unstable. The woman who refuses to settle for almost, even when almost feels comfortable. That choice can look lonely from the outside, but inside it feels clean, honest, right? High-value women understand that alignment also means timing. Sometimes the right person shows up at the wrong moment. And instead of forcing it, they accept it. They don't try to freeze time. They don't pressure growth. They let life unfold. They know that forcing alignment only creates resentment later. Winning, to them, is not keeping someone who isn't ready, willing, or able to meet them where they are. Winning is walking away with your self-respect intact. Winning is choosing clarity over confusion. Winning is not betraying yourself just to avoid being alone. They also understand that alignment applies to more than relationships. It applies to careers, friendships, environments. They don't stay where their values are compromised. They don't cling to roles that require them to pretend. They don't confuse stability with fulfillment. They choose alignment because alignment feels light. It doesn't drain. It doesn't demand masks. It allows them to be fully themselves without apology. And here's the part most people miss: alignment attracts alignment. When high-value women stop measuring success by possession, their lives open up. They meet people who match their pace, opportunities that fit their values, relationships that feel like collaboration, not competition. They don't need to win someone over. They meet someone already walking in the same direction. That doesn't mean everything lasts forever. Even aligned things can end. But when they do, they end with understanding instead of bitterness, with gratitude instead of regret, because alignment honors growth. It allows people to change without becoming enemies. It allows endings without devastation. High-value women don't fear endings because they don't see them as losses. They see them as course corrections. They know that life isn't asking them to collect people or achievements. It's asking them to live in truth, to choose what fits, to release what doesn't. And when they do, something powerful happens. They stop trying to win arguments. They stop trying to be chosen. They stop trying to prove anything. They simply live aligned. And alignment has a way of rewarding honesty. It brings peace where chaos once lived, clarity where confusion once ruled, depth where surface level connection once passed for love. They understand that winning isn't about possession. It's about walking forward with what truly belongs with you and letting the rest go without a fight. High-value women don't chase because they trust life. They trust timing. And most importantly, they trust themselves. They know that what's meant to meet them will meet them halfway. And if it doesn't, they keep walking, not because they lost, but because they already won.